which coaches are under the most pressure for the upcoming season. Checking in from Ames, Iowa. Iowa State hopes you can make it back on this year's tour. I do too. I do too. Balls are forever in their court. I do too. So which coaches are under the most pressure? I got different kinds of pressure out there. You know that I think there's competitive pressure and then there's job security pressure where you could actually get fired if you don't do a certain amount of something this year. Well, I want to start with Scott Frost. We've talked a little bit about Nebraska over the last couple of weeks, and I want to circle back to Nebraska. It's right there. Everything Scott Frost needs to have a much better season than he has so far is right there. As we talked about the other night, they have done, next to USC, the most work in the transfer portal of any Power 5 program out there. I think the number is 16, the amount of kids they've taken. Their over-under win total is 7.5. They have not made a bowl yet under Scott Frost. So the odds makers feel it. The schedule is very favorable. Also, the transfer portal has given them an infusion of talent, not the least of which includes at the quarterback position with Casey Thompson. They need to make a bowl game, or hopefully a little bit better than that. It's not a ridiculously high hurdle to clear here. If you're watching on YouTube, you see over there so far 4-8, 5-7, 3-5, 3-9. Those are the records under Scott Frost so far. Now, you need to know also he's got a reduced buyout after October 1st this year. So while I'm not suggesting they're just counting the hours and minutes and seconds until they can just punt on this entire experiment, it is a make or break year in many ways for him. And it's there. It's there. If they don't make a bowl or better this year, there are no more excuses. Everything you need to have lined up is lined up there. Now, the next guy I'm going to talk about is not under the same kind of pressure. It's a different pressure. It's a more competitive pressure. Jimbo Fisher's got some pressure this year. Job's not on the line. It's not any kind of hot seat talk. I'm not talking about Texas A&M fans demanding that he win the SEC championship, but what I do think that they expect from him is more than 8 wins. I think they expect for him to be competitive in every game they play. You know, they cannot have any of these 3+ touchdown drubbings anymore like they had the first couple of times they played Bama, finally beat them last year outright. That's got to be in the past. They've got to improve the passing game significantly. So what A&M fans need to see, and then me also just kind of satelliting around them, what I need to see from them this year is I need to see improvement in the passing game. You know, that 90-second statistic in pass plays of 20 yards or more, I need that to be a distant memory by the time we get to December this year. I need them to be competitive in every game, and I need to see things, at the very least from this year, that tells me that team's a bona fide contender for Atlanta the following year. Now, if they're there a year early, they're there a year early. If they upset Bama in Tuscaloosa, so be it. That would be one of the stories of the season. Better than 8 wins, much improved passing game, no double-digit losses to anyone, or maybe like 3 touchdown losses to anyone. That's what I'm looking for. They play a very, very difficult schedule. We're going to talk about this a little bit later on, so I'm not going into great detail on the A&M schedule. But this is not a team anymore that I think is going to be susceptible to those bad losses. They're just too talented. They're too deep. So it would very much surprise me. But again, I'm going to push that a little bit later on because we're going to talk about them more. Brian Harsin is the next coach I want to speak about. And producer Jesse and I are just lounging about the office a little while ago, and all of a sudden, up pops a tweet from Brian Harsin. This is the Auburn head coach. For those of you unfamiliar, guy started a new podcast. I didn't see that coming. But then again, I think Brian Harsin's done a lot of things right over the past couple of months. You may say to me, how is that possible? I haven't played a game. I know that. But if we are to well document this, then we understand all the turmoil that was around that program. A lot of folks thought he may not even be the head coach there. Well, he still is. And then they go through spring. Now, you know, when we're talking about job security here, this is an unusual situation at the very least. Even though he's only a year in, and this wouldn't make sense at many other places, it's Auburn. And so at Auburn, you know, you got some external forces maybe working against you. Probably no maybe to it. It's just working against you. They also, much like pretty much everyone in the SEC West, play one of the toughest schedules in the country, but also they need to recruit better. I think they had around the 20th ranked class this past cycle. They have to be better than that. We've talked about this before. You're not going to out-scheme and out-develop Brian Kelly and Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban every week. You got to play them every year. You got to play Kirby every year, at least until they change your scheduling rotation. So I'm saying that to say I'm not sure what the number is. I think we'll speak about this more in the summer. I'm not sure there's a magical 8-win and you're safe, 7 wins and you're out of here sort of situation right now. But I will say this, just observationally, I think Brian Harsin knows the score. I think he knows what time it is, because this is not a guy who is world-renowned for his interpersonal communication skills. Doesn't really traffic in the marketing of himself very often. Well, that's in the past now, because about the past month and a half, he's been out on the road. He's been all over the Southeast. He's been meeting with Auburn fans, been going to the speaking engagements. And then today, lo and behold, the Brian Harsin podcast, that's not the actual name of it. It had a pretty catchy name. Huddle with Hars, I think is the name. So I'm going to give it a listen over the next couple of days. And I'm very interested in that. Anyway, I'm saying all that to tell you, I think he gets it. Whatever the knocks are against him that he believes he can control, he's actively working on. And I wish he'd do a lot more of it, because I don't think the guy's half bad. In a public setting, I actually think he's pretty good. I hope he does more of it. All right, then there's this entire chunk of the ACC that warrants consideration right here. I'm going to start with Mike Norvel, because I don't think he's on the kind of hot seat, so to speak, that some of these other guys are. I think Mike Norvel's a little bit like Jimbo in the SEC. A&M's a better program than Florida State is right now. What I'm saying is, I don't think Norvel is in as much job security problems or job security issues right now as some of these other guys. But what I do think is he's got that competitive pressure too. He's got a situation where they came in, they had the first year in the COVID year, and they were 3-6. They had second year last year, they were 5-7. And that fan base is not unreasonable right now. Florida State fans want 7, 8 wins. Some of them would really stretch and go 9, but most of them are looking at 7 or 8 wins. That is doable. They've had 2 good portal hauls. That's doable. But again, you can't be dropping games that are inexplicable, like we've seen over the past couple of years with Florida State. The other thing to just keep in mind here, and I know it's not excuse-making season, but I'm going to make one for them. You got to understand about recruiting. When they came in, obviously they're a new staff, and you've got COVID measures in place. So you can't go on the road. Your assistant coaches can't get on the road. That didn't all of a sudden just disappear. Like a portion of last year, they also couldn't get on the road. So some of their coaches now, and any of these new staffs that came in 2020, you're getting a first full cycle out on the road now. That's hard. It's hard to get your recruiting legs under you when you were at that kind of disadvantage. And you could rightfully say, well, Josh, that was the same for every staff. That's true, friends, but some of those staffs had already been there in 2017, 18, and 19 and had 2 or 3 years worth of evals, film, in-person contact with players and their coaching staffs at the high school level and their parents and their aunts and uncles and guidance counselors. They had none of that at Florida State. The second one in the ACC is Jeff Collins. Jeff Collins has 9 wins in 3 seasons at Georgia Tech. There were some people who thought he would not be back this past year. I felt like he would get at least 1 more year, and he did. They lost, by all accounts, their best player in Jahmyr Gibbs to the transfer portal, had a number of guys overturned on the staff. I'll tell you what it feels like there right now. If you've ever played Tetris and the blocks start stacking up for you and you get near the top, you know how your attitude and your demeanor changes, and you just go into what I call Tetris panic mode. And that is, no longer do you have 5 or 6 seconds to decide where to put the block. You're just frantically trying to go left, right, and you're trying to anticipate, and then you're simultaneously looking over at the other cell to see what the next blocks are going to be. And sometimes it pays off and you get lucky and you press the buttons the right way and you get yourself back down, and 2 minutes later you're saying, man, I can't believe that I made it through that. But sometimes you don't make it through it. And it feels like a lot of the moves being made at Georgia Tech right now are sort of the Tetris panic variety. And hopefully for them it works out. It's just that I think everyone there gets this is the year. This is the make or break year at Georgia Tech. Dino Babers at Syracuse is the same way. Dino Babers, in 2017, he beat Clemson. Everyone remembers that upset. And he went 4-8 that year. Then they popped a 10-win season on you the following year, which it's hard to have a recollection of. But since then, it's been downhill. It's been 5-7, 1-10, 5-7. They got to make a bowl. The AD up there has been pretty direct about that. They got to make a bowl. And Scott Satterfield at Louisville also, I don't think has won a portion of the fan base over since he outright interviewed for the South Carolina job a couple of years ago, didn't get it, and then had to write an apology letter to the fan base. He's 18-18 in 3 seasons there, though. So Mike Norvel, Jeff Collins, Dino Babers, Scott Satterfield, that's a lot of the ACC to keep an eye on. But there's a lot of job security metrics to keep an eye on all across the country this year.